From a young age, my sister exhibited a very self-centered personality, continuously displaying this attitude towards our family. The behavior of my sister went beyond mere childishness. Whenever her desires were not fulfilled, she often reacted strongly, which significantly impacted our lives. Such an attitude was evident early on, with one incident particularly memorable when she was about 5 or 6 years old. One evening, while our mother was preparing dinner, my sister wanted some sweets and showed her displeasure when she didn't get them, suddenly throwing a terrible tantrum. Our parents tried to talk to her calmly, but she wouldn't listen at all and kept on crying loudly, following her emotions. Witnessing this, our entire house felt unstable, and an awkward silence filled the air. At that time, I was still quite young myself and didn't fully grasp how troublesome my sister's tantrums could be for the family, yet the situation left a strong impression on me. Seeing the whole family confused and swayed by her emotions, I felt a strong aversion. The sudden explosions of my sister's emotions disrupted the peace in our home one after another, making it difficult for us to spend our days calmly. Although my sister was young, these tantrums posed a significant challenge in her upbringing and were an issue that needed to be considered within the entire family's emotional state. It is also true that I often felt a sense of helplessness as we got dragged into these situations time and time again. The incident involving a pricey doll that my sister wanted was particularly shocking to me. This doll was well known and expensive enough that even I was aware of it, and it was understandable that our parents hesitated to buy it. Because of its high price, it was not something our family could easily afford, and our parents tried to explain this to my sister. However, she did not understand their explanation at all. Unable to control her emotions, she suddenly started crying and threw a tantrum. More surprisingly, she even acted out against our parents. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my young sister angrily lash out and raise her hand against our older parents, an abnormal situation. At that moment, I was at a loss for words, standing frozen in place from the sheer shock. Normally, one would expect a firm response to such behavior, but our parents were desperate to calm the situation and appease her. By the end of the day, they had compromised and decided to buy an alternative doll for her. Although this was clearly a result of giving in to my sister's whims, perhaps my parents were too exhausted and tried to settle the situation by appeasing her. This event was shocking for me and merely reinforced the extent of the impact my sister's tantrums had on the family. Watching my parents repeatedly compromise in response to her inappropriate reactions increasingly seemed to encourage her behavior. The whole family was swayed by these tantrums, and ultimately, my sister learned that her demands would be met, seemingly gaining more control over those around her. I was concerned about how this situation would develop in the future and felt anxious that this negative cycle would continue unless my sister's behavior improved. My sister's strategy of throwing tantrums to get what she wanted was effective, and our parents often succumbed to it. By the time she was 7 or 8 years old, it seemed that she had de facto decision-making power within the family. At that point, the family being swayed by my sister's demands had become a daily norm. Unconsciously, everyone prioritized her wishes, and various decisions were made according to what she wanted. Even something as simple as how to spend a holiday was decided based on her desires, without significant consideration for other family members' opinions or wishes. The choice of dinner menu, where to go for outings, and even which restaurant to dine out at were mostly dictated by my sister's preferences. The surroundings and opinions of other family members were mostly ignored, resulting in a family life centered around her, tailored to her wishes. If I had been an outsider observing this scene, it would likely have appeared quite strange and uncomfortable. However, for us, that was the reality, and we accepted it without question. It was clear to me that our parents were treating my sister specially. On the surface, they seemed to claim they treated everyone equally. They appeared to be considerate so I wouldn't feel dissatisfied, but the reality was evident. My sister was favored. Her demands were prioritized. And I felt I was treated as if, "This should be enough for you." This unfairness gradually became painful for me, and I increasingly felt my position in the family becoming unstable. I understood why our parents were especially considerate towards my sister. She often exploded in emotions and threw tantrums, and they were trying to smoothly handle her behavior. However, the ongoing situation, where the whole family was affected by her influence, led to escalating demands and disrupted the balance within our home. One year on my birthday, I asked for an item I wanted, but my parents declined, citing financial difficulties. I tried to accept this decision. However, just a few weeks later, the latest electronic device my sister demanded was bought for her as if nothing was amiss. This event was a significant shock for me and strongly highlighted the clear difference in attitude between my parents towards my sister and me. From a young age, my sister had a personality that made excessive demands on those around her. And this became more pronounced as she grew older, turning into a domestic issue. Our parents excessively accommodated her, prioritizing giving her what she wanted, whereas such allowances were seldom made for me. However, I also understood that this did not mean I was unloved. I knew in my head that our parents were not intentionally being unfair to either of us. Still, dissatisfaction gradually accumulated in my heart. My sister's minor requests were immediately fulfilled, whereas when I asked for something similar, I was often refused with "Let's see the situation," or "Think about it later," as excuses. This felt unfair to me, and I couldn't help but feel left out. When I thought deeply about this, I could understand that my parents were not maliciously treating either of us. Yet it still felt like a very unfair treatment to me. This discriminatory treatment gradually built up in my heart over time, and I couldn't help but question the clear differences between my sister and me. Since she was young, my sister has been making excessive demands and acting spoiled, which our parents must have been aware of. Despite this, they treated her leniently and continued to meet her demands. As her demands escalated and became the norm, I became hesitant to ask for anything, and my position within the family became increasingly ambiguous. As this situation repeated itself, I grew increasingly frustrated and felt that I had to resolve this unfairness somehow. Although my parents' intention was to indulge her so her emotions are taken care of, it resulted in me becoming like a sacrificial lamb, and it was very hard to bear this imbalance. The distribution of roles and priorities within the family became more explicit, and I felt confusion and dissatisfaction with these differences. These experiences caused me significant emotional conflict. As a result, I carried the burden alone, and I still remember how dissatisfaction accumulated over the days. The inequality was even more pronounced during family vacations. The decision-making power for travel destinations was with my sister, and her opinions were prioritized as a matter of course. Even when I suggested, "I want to relax in a place rich in nature," it was quickly overturned by my sisters. "I prefer theme parks." Although there were moments when the whole family discussed it, in the end, it was always my sister's wishes that prevailed, and my suggestions were mostly ignored. Looking back now as an adult, I find it hard to accept the situation where my sister seemed to be the center of the family. Back then, all I could do within such a family was to try desperately to attract our parents' attention like my sister. I believed that getting good grades in school and being diligent in helping around the house were ways to gain their approval. However, I was rarely treated specially, like my sister. Despite being troubled by this situation, I struggled to find my place, but ultimately, I only remember feeling a one-sided fatigue. This situation continued not only during my childhood but also through my adolescence, and for me, my sister represented the symbol of inequality in the family. As a result, I harbored complex feelings towards our parents, and the space called home ceased to be a place of comfort and happiness. The confusion began when my parents asked, "What do you want for Christmas?" I expressed my wish to replace my phone, which was nearing the end of its life, with a new one. Meanwhile, my sister requested a surprising gift. At dinner in late November, my sister suddenly made a taunting remark. My present will definitely be more luxurious than yours," laughing as she said it. A bit shocked, I asked, "Why do you always try to put yourself above me?" Without hesitation, she replied with a mocking tone, "Of course, because I am more loved by our parents than you are." The atmosphere became heavy in an instant. Her words could be taken as a joke, but for me it was a moment that sharply reminded me of the inequality I had always felt. Having felt from a young age that my sister was treated specially within the family, I harbored strong dissatisfaction and disappointment each time I heard such words. Yet even then, our parents showed no reaction to my sister's behavior and ignored the topic. Needless to say, this only deepened the wound in my heart. These seemingly trivial exchanges accumulated, making Christmas, which should have been a joyous occasion, a time filled with complex emotions for me. My sister's presence and the special treatment she received always cast a shadow over my heart. The atmosphere seemed on the verge of a light argument, but ultimately, the discussion didn't progress further at that moment. We continued our meal in silence, ending the topic without saying anything more. However, my sister's remarks continued to linger in my mind. Finally, the long-awaited Christmas arrived, and the moment to open the presents came. When I opened the box, it contained the new mobile phone I had hoped for, an iPhone 13. The moment I held it, I was overjoyed and spontaneously thanked my parents. In addition to the phone, I received practical items like deodorant and socks. But most importantly, having the long-awaited mobile phone filled me with satisfaction. Then it was my sister's turn to open her present. The moment she opened the first box, her eyes lit up, and she joyfully exclaimed. Inside was a compact Gucci bag, something she had long wanted. Her expression brightened. For her, that Christmas turned out to be more than ideal, and I couldn't help but feel astonished beyond jealousy. While I would like to think that Christmas presents are not a symbol of one's worth, through this event, I was painfully reminded once again that my sister was a special presence within our family. However, my sister merely said, "Thank you," formally, appearing somehow unsatisfied. Whether it was different from what she expected, or she had other thoughts, a shadow seemed to lurk behind her smile. Finally, she burst into tears and muttered, "I can't believe this turned out like this," before running upstairs. Left behind, my parents and I were at a loss for words, not understanding what had happened. About an hour after my sister had locked herself in her room, she came back downstairs. She openly expressed her emotions, starting to complain. "My present is of lesser value than yours." We were all surprised, but even more so when my sister brought out her smartphone and started checking the prices of the gifts she received. She verified the price of the Gucci bag on a website. Then, comparing it to the mobile phone I received, she began to claim that her present was unfairly less valuable. According to her research, my new mobile phone was about $200 more expensive than the bag she received. It seemed that this slight monetary difference was perceived as a significant issue by my sister. Witnessing her almost obsessive actions, I felt her character and values were starkly highlighted in that moment. Dissatisfied, my sister directly demanded that I give her the $200 difference in cash. Shocked by such an unreasonable request, I firmly refused, saying, "There's no way I would do such a ridiculous thing." At that moment, my sister's anger became uncontrollable and exploded. I still don't understand why I had left my new mobile phone on the table at that time. I suppose I didn't expect her to become so furious and felt too secure. However, this optimistic judgment led to a tragic outcome. As her anger reached peak, she grabbed my new mobile phone without hesitation and threw it with full force towards the wall. The sound was ear-piercing, and the next moment, the phone smashed against the wall, shattering into pieces and scattering across the floor. I stood there speechless. The scene before my eyes was so surreal that I could only stare in dismay. But gradually, a deep anger began to well up inside me. When I finally spoke, my words poured out uncontrollably. "Why would you do such a thing? My phone isn't just an object. It had important data in it, and I really liked it. I was surprised at how clearly my words of criticism towards my sister came out. I understand you're upset, but this is too much. Did you think breaking it would solve anything? In the end, it only causes me trouble. My sister didn't respond at all at the moment, just averted her gaze with a stern expression. This attitude made me even more irritated. I'm willing to listen and want to help, but how can we build trust if you do things like this? Don't think everything is forgiven just because you're my sister. While saying this, I felt as if the hopes I had for a kinder, mutually respectful relationship with her had shattered just like the phone. Staring at the pieces scattered on the floor, I managed to say, "You'll be paying for the repairs. If you can't manage that, think about how to control your anger. I can't forgive this kind of behavior ever again." I tried to appear calm, but my shaking voice couldn't completely hide my emotions. As silence enveloped the room, I felt a deep rift forming between us once again. While waiting for my sister to say something, I stood enveloped by the slightly cold air of the room. After a while, I carefully picked up each piece of the broken phone and, holding them all in my hands, headed up to my room on the second floor. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't help but question what I had done wrong and why my relationship with my sister had deteriorated to this extent. Feeling that my sister's actions were excessively over the top, I finally decided to call the police. This decision came after much deliberation, but it seemed essential to me. However, in response to this, my parents criticized me, merely hurling insults and calling me such an arrogant daughter, showing no signs of taking the situation seriously. I couldn't help but feel very disappointed by their attitude. My contacting the police meant that this issue could no longer be contained within our family. With the police involved, details of the incident spread among our relatives, leading many of them to express their opinions on the matter. Our relatives didn't just blame my sister. They also directed criticism at our parents for continuing to indulge her whims and letting the situation worsen to this point. Isn't this the result of your neglect? Why did you spoil only her and neglect your other daughter? Harsh opinions were voiced one after another. Every time I heard such criticism, it seemed that the unjust treatment I had received from my parents was finally recognized, and I felt relieved. At the same time, I wondered why this situation had been allowed to persist for so long. The strict remarks and pressure from our relatives significantly impacted my parents. It became clear that they could no longer keep this as a mere family issue, and they finally had to admit their long-standing mistakes. It was our leniency that kept accepting her whims, they said in an unusually subdued tone. When I saw my parents talking like this, I felt a complex mix of emotions. While there was a sense of catharsis as the long-standing distrust and feelings of inequality in my family began to clear, there was also regret and emptiness that these issues hadn't been resolved earlier. This incident became a significant turning point for our family, especially for my parents, who had to rethink the importance of treating all family members equally. My parents eventually decided to change their indulgent behavior towards my sister and resolved to enforce strict discipline. As a first step, my father proposed that my sister live for a period at the farm managed by our grandparents. My father's parents are farmers, and he himself grew up working on that farm, learning about diligence and patience through such a lifestyle. In contrast, my sister was raised in a pampered environment, far removed from effort and hardship, and we felt that she needed an opportunity to rethink her lifestyle and attitude. The farm managed by our grandparents is located in a harsh environment far from the comforts of the city. There, daily life involves physical labor such as working in the fields from early morning and tending to livestock, with hard work at the center of life. Moreover, farm life is known as an ideal place to learn diligence, discipline, and responsibility. For my sister, living in such an environment would be a stark contrast to her indulgent past and would pose a significant challenge. It is an appropriate opportunity to teach her that effort is necessary to achieve anything and that true joy lies beyond hard work. My father strongly believed that this experience would fundamentally change my sister's spoiled behavior. When she learned that our grandparents were coming to pick her up, my sister couldn't bear it and broke down in tears. "I don't want to live with my grandparents," she pleaded repeatedly, desperately apologizing as if regretting her past behavior. Witnessing this, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Seeing my sister face the consequences of her actions and reflect in tears for the first time made me feel that she was finally showing some signs of growth. It was a moment that slightly alleviated the anger and dissatisfaction I had harbored until then. However, seeing my sister desperately apologizing while crying, I couldn't help but feel sympathy somewhere in my heart. No matter how much she had been selfish and troubled the family, I couldn't bring myself to dislike my sister. Perhaps this is the mysterious strength of familial bonds. Seeing my sister's pained expression made me think that how she faces her own difficulties will be key to her future. I quietly pondered how much she would change through this experience and how we should watch over her as a family. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that this was an excellent opportunity for her to fundamentally revise her privileged past lifestyle filled with indulgence. Through this opportunity, I strongly felt that my sister needed to understand how her actions had affected those around her and to face the realities of life. Living on our grandparents' farm, a place of labor and responsibility, is an unavoidable challenge for her, but also a chance to make a new start. Of course, it won't be an easy journey. In an environment that is the complete opposite of her carefully protected past life, how she will change remains unknown. However, I am convinced that this is the experience she needs, and if she embraces it, it will lead to her own growth. My sister, initially constantly complaining as she worked in the fields from early morning, has gradually begun to confront herself under the stern yet loving guidance of our grandparents. It's hard to imagine her being muddy while harvesting vegetables, a sight far from the sister I knew. I hope she comes to understand the importance of controlling her emotions and the value of earning her own money. While I can't yet say that my sister has completely reformed, it's clear that a sense of responsibility for her actions is beginning to take root. On the other hand, my parents have also reflected on their past behavior and apologized to me. However, recalling their previous attitude, I couldn't decide to forgive everything. I accepted their apologies but chose to keep some distance, seeing them honestly admit. "We also had many things to reflect on," has gradually made the atmosphere at home more harmonious. As everyone in the family tried to change, the conflicts of the past have entirely receded into the background. Above all, I am truly relieved that the entire family has reaffirmed our bonds and can envision a future where we support each other more strongly than before.